Hello there, and welcome to my presentation on my franchise, The Seasons of Fantasy. Before we get in, I just want to go over a bit of myself, and then we'll get into the story, characters, cast, and other crucial details. And I also want to say apologies for the camera. It's going to cut off a little bit in the corner, but as you'll see, I've added a lot of material, writing, and artwork, and it was just inevitable that it was going to cut off a little bit. But if you are watching this, that means you have access to this presentation, so you can go over the slides as needed. And you also have access to the book files, both for my current two books, art book and the first novel. So let's get into this. So my name is Michael Grimberg. I have been working in games and animation for 10 years. I have worked with several AAA game studios over the years through QA, testing, technical art, and most recently illustration and concept art. I'm currently working through Epic Games on a freelance and contract basis, and teaching and mentoring through CG Pro, Vertex School, and separately developing this original IP at my company, Grimberg Games Inc., or GGI. I also currently mentor as a volunteer at Games for Love, and all of my information is at the bottom in this presentation, so you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, via email, or on my ArtStation, which is also my main portfolio, so I've attached that there. I have been mentoring at Games for Love for basically half of this year already, and a lot of what I've been doing there is mentoring interns, students in high school, college students, and playing games with kids, because that's the whole point of the organization, to help kids and help anyone get into the creative field. And a lot of that, which I have been doing on and off since 2013 by working with kids and teens through summer camps, through tech camps, helping at schools, and all of that has contributed to inspiring me to create these characters that you're going to see, because this is a story about youth. It's a story about finding yourself, and it's a story about heeding the lessons of your family, tribe, whatever group you're in, while still following your own path and inspiring others to have the confidence and bravery and imagination to do the same. So, what am I pitching? I'm pitching the Seasons of Fantasy, or TSOF, or T.S.O.F for short. I think it sounds a little better that way, and I think more people would say it that way. It kind of sounds kind of exciting, kind of like an anime adventure, because a lot of anime shows and movies have abbreviations that people sometimes rather call them by instead of their full title. So the animated series, following a group of 4 to 5 lead characters and focusing on 2 teenage protagonists. Those are Dyra and Timon, and you can see them in the artwork at the top right. So Dyra is the pink girl, and Timon is her brother. And as you can see in the artwork, I've illustrated a basic version of the land. All of the environments and architectures there are not that close in proximity, but it's just giving you a brief overview of how the land looks and the overall purpose. You have the main lead girl, you have her brother, you have the little dragon named Zeke, who also transforms into an adult mentor, their village magistrate. And you have at the very back what I call Mount Shrock. It's kind of a mix of Mordor and an original creation, and there's a little shard at the top that becomes very important to the story later on. So it is a fantasy setting set on New Earth, set 1,000 years in the future, but without the typical modern aesthetic. So there was a big cataclysmic event that happened in the universe, and it basically halted time. So it takes place in the future, but it is still closer to the Stone Age or medieval times. It even reverted back from modern times, which is when this story starts out. It starts out in 2024, 2025, our time, but still with some technological advancements. But then it reverts back to kind of a dark magic, medieval, Stone Age type of era, while still having modern and advanced technology in pieces, but still less than we would have now. So I felt that was a very unique way to go about this. It's futuristic, but it's not modern, it's not urban setting, it's not cyberpunk or anything like that. And I feel like there hasn't really been something like that, especially in this type of story. Each sequel and installment will cover a new theme and genre. Book and season two will be sci fi focused and in space, and the series expands into games over time. So, this is a multimedia project that I want to have starting through novels, as I have been doing, and then converting those novels into audiobooks, and then creating games, and just having this be a big franchise geared towards teenagers and kids in terms of the writing, but still something that adults can enjoy because it's fantastical, vibrant, and the sci-fi aspect is not going to be something like Star Wars. There's not going to be a waging war. It's going to be something closer to Star Trek, where it's more grounded, more scientific. But at the same time, you could say it's kind of science fantasy, which is what Star Wars is. It's just not going to be this massive war waging space opera. Each sequel and installment will cover a new theme and genre, like I said. So I want the variety to come from that. I want each book, each new sequel installment to be a new theme and genre. And in the case of games later on, that will be like DLC or a sequel. But in this case, I think it would be really, really great and refreshing to have first animated season be completely grounded in this modern Earth magical world, and then go into space, but still not go too crazy on the sci fi aspect. So, dark magic controls the world, myths and legends become reality. The golden age of man, which is what I called our time, the golden age of man, becomes the dark age of monsters and mutants. These titles can be changed, mainly the Dark Age of Monsters and Mutants. I think it works. It just has to be straightforward and get to the point. But I am open to having it be changed to something more simpler or something that interests people more. Primary inspirations are Arcane, The Owl House, Stranger Things, Witcher, Indiana Jones, many, many. So Star Trek, standard mythology like Norse mythology, because I love games like God of War. And those games also got me more into the father child, parent guardian type of dynamic, as well as games like The Last of Us. So that's always been a driving inspiration for me when creating this universe. Sherlock Holmes and Lovecraft incorporating the mystery, dark aspects, modern grounded world, and those fantastical monsters into this more grounded setting, as well as Zelda, child focused, more stylized, but not stylized in the literal sense, more stylized like the fantasy world. Warhammer, where it is a dark future, again, set on Earth, but also other planets later on. But it's not grim dark. It's not brutal like Warhammer. This is something, again, I want kids and teens to be able to enjoy as well. So something like Star Wars The Clone Wars tonally is good, something that kids 4 and up can enjoy and watch. TMNT, that group dynamic, the story has at least 4 to 5 main characters. So, and they all work off of each other and they're all vibrant. And TMNT has been inspiration for that as well. X-Men, again, same thing, but also the mutant aspect, which also ties into TMNT, but more so all around because TMNT has more mutant creatures and characters all around, while X-Men is more humanoid. So I'm focusing on the group aspects and kind of blending those together in this way. And Gravity Falls, again, simple style, vibrant, set in an earthy type of environment and our world, and also following child protagonists with some adult characters here and there. And I want this to have 12 to 22 episodes per season, less if suitable. The reason I want that to be the format is because limited series formats, 6 to 8 episodes, are really turning people off. And when it's something like a massive fantasy adventure where the script can differ from the source material if there is any source material. In this case, I am completely open to making changes in the script, not drastic ones, but making changes and additions to the script and focusing more on side characters as well, and also adding more things like dialogue and different scenarios. And I want to go back to the original format of 2000s television and everything before that because people need lengthy, great, strong stories that don't rush. People don't want to have movies in their shows, just like they don't want to have movies in their games. So I think, again, I'm going to make an anime comparison. Anime is just so focused on style and story and the deep characters. And that's really the best type of content to reference and take inspiration from. And some of the shows, just like Naruto, have 40 plus episodes in a single season. So we don't need to go that crazy. But I think going back to the 12 to 22 episodes per season format is something that many people have wanted for a while. And they especially don't want to have a short, limited series and wait a week for each episode, especially when it can become filler. Um, so, following that format and also doing something like Netflix does, like when they release Stranger Things and other shows, they can just release them in a whole batch. The season is out. People want to binge. So, that's just the format and style that I believe we should follow. Now, what are the seasons? The seasons are the term for each realm, which are sections of the land separated by magic and the cosmic bang cataclysm. The realms were dubbed by me as the seasons due to each realm having its own singular weather pattern, cycle, and season. So one realm is always stormy, the other is always snowy, other one is always kind of foggy, and the other one is always sunny. The franchise is called The Seasons of, followed by fantasy or any other genre that represents the story as we go along, being told and creates a sense of mystery and allows the audience to fill in the final word based on how they perceive the story. The format can be followed just as it is or kept as The Seasons of Fantasy. I think The Seasons of Fantasy obviously sounds better and it's less confusing, but I think the seasons of has this mystery. I've been going back and forth about that for basically a couple of years, and we can really see how well either one works and which one is best to use as we go along. So I'm not really concerned about that, but for now, I'm going by the Seasons of Fantasy because the first book is out and it can both be the title of the book and also the franchise, and then easily change later if needed. So, who is this for? Like I briefly mentioned before, this is for kids and teens from age 4 and up. It can be pushed up to just 6 and up if we consider the content maybe to be a bit too mature for ages 4, but I've made sure that it's very, very family friendly, but not in a way that also turns off adults. To be immersed in a vibrant, slightly dark fantasy universe with young, courageous, weird, and colorful characters and creatures, and the kids and teens can relate with them and be inspired by them to be brave and potentially become artists and creators. So that last part is, of course, something that is a goal of anyone who's creating content and their vision, and they want to inspire others to become artists and designers as well. But I am really, really pushing the role playing aspect of this, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, where I want kids and teens to kind of view this as a build their own story in their mind while, of course, watching and following the preset story. I want them to be able to imagine different scenarios, and I want them to be inspired to become artists and creators in real life, but also maybe in their mind role play as a character that they create for themselves based on these ones that resides in this universe, and maybe is an artist or creator or whatever type of character they want to be as. So that's also where the multimedia aspect comes into this as well. I want this to work for books, audiobooks, graphic novels, which falls into the books category, animated show, movie, games, everything, and also education. I know educational apps are not in style anymore as much as they were, but kids still spend a lot of time playing mobile games. So I feel like having these teen and kid characters be the students in educational content, and the creatures and their other guardians in the story be the professors and teachers would be really something that would get kids more into learning and kind of approaching education as an RPG. So I will expand on that later on, but that I think is a great way to honestly both get kids, teens, and adults into learning specific things, and also helps families bond more over that too. The characters are specifically designed to work strongly as engaging fantasy characters for animation games. So, what I just said, books, educational apps, kids are students, wizard or creatures are the teachers. Additional example inspiration, we can be heroes. So it is kid focused, saving the world, abilities, very vibrant, mix of known and aspiring young actors. I think Robert Rodriguez's work is something that is the best inspiration for a lot of kids' content that has come after that, but it's also so wacky and vibrant and dreamlike, which is his intention, um, that it draws in adults as well, and it becomes nostalgic. Because I also grew up on, of course, Spy Kids and Shark Boy and Lava Girl, and now We Can Be Heroes. So it's just something for each generation, and focusing on dreams and fantasy is exactly what people need for escapism. A lot of this, a lot of the creature designs and a lot of the story elements came from my dreams. I have very, very wild, wacky, weird dreams. And all of that has inspired this. I sometimes wake up at 4 or something in the morning, and then I note down what I wrote, then I draw it the next day. So I want this franchise to be a lot like what Robert Rodriguez does as well, because dreams are ever evolving. They involve both what you do during the day, what you're worrying about, what you're enjoying, but also completely new random stuff you never even really think about. So all of that basically creates automatic content, and this works as a multimedia franchise in that way as well. Now let's go over the casting. So here is the main cast. Extras can be cast internally, doing additional voices, having extra side characters, because the script would have more dialogue, more characters, more room for that than a book does. So first we have Brimstone, as he goes by, Brody Watts, Vivian Lyra Blair, Christopher Sean, Richard Horvitz, and with Vivian Wasson. Vivian Lyra Blair. So Vivian is a highly experienced, highly versatile, diverse actress with already a massive portfolio of huge franchises like Star Wars, Stephen King through The Boogeyman, We Can Be Heroes, which is the Shark Boy and Lava Girl franchise, and more. And she just continuously does so much, both as an actress, writer, producer, and so many other things. I have wanted to see her in a voice focused role for a while, and I've wanted that to be my project first. And I just can't see anyone else aside from her in the role of Dyra. I am completely open minded to helping new actors and doing auditions, but I am very, very intent and set on this cast because I have handpicked these actors. I have met them all in various capacities. Some of them I've stayed in touch with for years at this point. And I've made them all aware of the project that's happening. I've met some of them at cons. I've stayed in touch with them online. And I just can't see any other actors in the roles, not just because I know them and because I picked them for several reasons, but because over time I have also written these characters to match the experiences and characters they've played in the past. Not exactly, of course, but being a blend. So in this case, Dyra is a ideal blend of Vivian's characters. So she has the rebellious, strong youth and just that fiery passion that Leia has, but she's not rebellious in a stubborn way exactly. She sees certain things and she fights monsters and demons, just like Vivian's character Sawyer in The Boogeyman, and that's also mixing this fantastical type of monster. I can't even really say setting because it's not a fantasy setting. It's still set in a house in our world, but that monster, that demon, the boogeyman itself, really creates this kind of fantasy blend with everything. And she has the vibrance of Guppy from We Can Be Heroes, as well as some similar powers. I have been writing these characters since 2018, like I mentioned, and a lot of the similarities are actually purely coincidental. But I have definitely taken inspiration from these characters, not just because they're all great young characters to take inspiration from, but because I want Vivian and I want all of the actors who I've cast in these specific roles to feel comfortable coming into these roles right away, to feel like they've played these characters before and they can easily get into it and work off of each other super well. And like I was mentioning, Dyra has the vibrance and similar powers to Guppy. So Guppy has the water powers. Dyra has cosmic powers that pull from the galaxy, and she can create these vortexes and bubbles and things like that using the stars and the cosmos. And she is generally just very strong, very vibrant, and rebellious, but not, again, not in a stubborn way, just like Leia, Sawyer, and Guppy all in one. And at the top, that is another character called Barb Wire, the barbecue cat. That's just another one of the random silly characters that I wanted to make kind of anime inspired into this franchise and series. And I want each actor to play several roles because I want them to be um, in future projects as well. Over time, these characters will all become leads in their own way. And when some characters inevitably get cut off from the stories, I want these actors to still have characters to play, and I want to take a kind of James Gunn approach to this. I want to stick to the same cast while still be open-minded and bring in new actors for other characters, of course, but I'm very intent on having these actors be in these roles for the very foreseeable future, and especially someone with Vivian's versatility. She can do a whole lot of different characters and voices, and Barbed Wire specifically is just another fun side character who isn't really in the book, but is in the art book and who I want to be part of the script just as a fun character. And I'm sure she'd have fun doing this kind of high pitched, fun voice for a talking cat that was brought to life, made more kind of human after the cosmic cataclysm. So there's a lot of different characters like those for each actor. Uh, these are characters that I've designed specifically for her as well, but we do not have to make the character look exactly like her. Just took some inspiration from that. So there are these other random characters like the common elf that would help the leads, help other supporting characters, and be kind of like a guide. And again, kind of more so in the background, but we could add on to them as time would go on. So in this case, the common elf, you can read the description so we don't spend too much time on each slide. And the bottom right character is just a fun character. Again, it doesn't need to be added to the story. I'm just showing this to showcase how I have incorporated each actor into their own characters to give them both the options to play the lead characters I've already written and fun characters who fully represent themselves. So this case, this is a dragon based on her bearded dragon named Sorrow. I've just scaled him up to be a big dragon. This isn't a character I've given a name to or anything. This is just a little side character I've written who was being attacked in her castle, and then her little dragon, who was a baby at the time, saved her, and they've been bonded for life. So I'm taking a lot of inspiration from Star Wars as well and other massive fantasy and sci-fi universes where even the side characters have a lot of lore for themselves, and it gives again the actors more choice and more diversity, and it keeps them in the franchise for a very long period of time. This is just a description of barbed wire, so feel free to read this. So Richard Horvitz, I met him twice so far. I've met him at Edmonton when I was volunteering at Fan Expo 2 years ago, which is also when I was helping Vivian Lyra Blair's table. And he's been in Toronto quite a few times, especially just recently at Fan Expo, so I spoke to him more again. But he is very, very versatile in character and creature voices, especially these high-pitched voices, and that's exactly what I want for Zeke. And I also want him to try to play the magistrate. If it doesn't really work out with kind of a lower voice, then we can have someone else, either the main cast or bring in someone new to play the magistrate. But Zeke is the magistrate. The cosmic bang, the radiation from that gave the magistrate the ability to shapeshift and form, and he absorbs these elements from all around, and he's just a morpher. And he's a little dragon companion that is always with the characters. And the other little green multicolored character is a baby Tycup. So there are these forest trolls creatures called Tycups, and they're just in nature. They help characters, and they're not really a big part of the story, but they do guide the characters in some ways, and I want him to do voices for that as well. And beside that is just like a goblin troll enemy. So just miscellaneous voices for each actor. And on top of that, Richard and Vivian Lyra Blair both know each other already very well. They're both very close. So the chemistry between them would be there as well. So everything has really fallen into place as I've been developing this, and we would go in and easily record, and the chemistry, the ideas, and the energy and experience would all be there all at once. And I also want him voicing other random creatures. The Grog Stirp is another one. It is this two-headed mutated dog wolf. I have another actor in mind who's in this presentation as well to voice. that creature because it's kind of a lower growl, but I want to explore Richard trying to do that as well. So even the same types of creatures and sometimes characters can have two different voices depending on the phase and the situation. Christopher Sean is another highly versatile actor. Just like the majority of the actors here, I've been connected and have spoken to him on and off for several years now. And I initially gave him updates on the project when it was in its very early stages and when it was basically a completely different project. Um, but now I'm keeping him in the loop, just like I'm keeping all the other actors in the loop. And I want him to play Timon, as well as another character who I also want another actor to get a shot at this as well. But the character at the bottom right, his name is Adias. I named him to kind of have like a Greek ancient name. He is thousands of years old, as in several thousands of years old. And he is one of the narrator messengers of the universe. So in the book, he does the prologue dialogue and the epilogue monologue dialogue. And he basically is an archivist and messenger who works for the overseers. And then there's another one who will come in the second book who I tease at the end of the first novel. And I kind of imagine him with a higher voice. And he basically travels in a space tram. So it's this red streetcar, train, tram type of vehicle. And it's protected by a magical bubble. And it floats around. I've been working on some concepts for that. So I haven't finished them yet. But this is the only Adias concept I've made so far. But the other ones will come later on in the second art book. And he's going to play, well, I want him to play Timon, who is, of course, the second lead character. The thing about Timon in this book is that the story revolves around him disappearing and Daira having to go find him, and then all the big twists and magical experiences happen. So he would only be at the beginning, sometimes in the middle, and at the end. But in the second book and going forward, he would be a consistent lead. And that's another reason why I want him to do other voices for other characters as well, and the same reasons for the other actors. But I am open to mixing the voices and seeing what works best as well. So William Brimstone, I want him to voice, this is the Grogsterp. The Coltrees are these low growling, kind of like the Ents in Lord of the Rings, but they're actually evil. They kind of keep to themselves. They live in the vanishing forest and they kind of spread all across the land. And explorers who are unfortunate enough to go into the forest are basically pulled underground. So there are different types of demons, both underground and above ground. And that's just all part of the overlaying message and myths and legends and things like that. And I also want him to voice the Emperor. So in the demon pick with the demon chasing the child, that is how the Emperor looks in the story. He is this big, fiery dragon head, basically reincarnated from his previous human form. And he basically controls all the demons and the pit of despair, and he pulls in souls of children, men, women, creatures, and enslaves them. So this is where the story gets more into that dark fantasy. But even with that, I have handled it in the story in a way that kids and teens can still read it and engage with it. And when I would want to make things like graphic novels, I would want that media to be more mature, more graphic for a larger audience. So that's how it works in the multimedia format as well. He is an actor who loves to do badass characters, who loves to do just die hard, any type of strong, powerful, aggressive characters. And as you can see by his photo shoots, he matches that personality. But I also want him to have an original character. We did discuss a character in the past for this one. This was very, very early on. Him kind of riding a bull. So I would want him to have an original character as well who kind of guides the characters in a way, joins them on their journey, maybe gives them weapons, creates weapons. It would be something to discuss with him. But these are the three main characters and other ones we'd figure out that I'd want him to voice. The Grogsterp is a main character, it's a creature, but eventually Zeke, who's the magistrate and the dragon form, who can turn into any animal, can understand the animals. It's kind of like when Link in Twilight Princess turns into his wolf form and then he can start communicating with other animals and creatures and understanding them. So, taking inspiration from that as well. So, a lot of opportunity with this. And just like with the other characters, I want to give the other male actors a chance to do some voices for like the demons and the demon slavers, the children and things like that. Everyone in the pit of despair, and also the emperor himself. But I'm pretty set on Brimstone being the voice of the emperor overall. Next is Vivian Watson, just like Vivian Lyra Blair, aside from sharing the same name. She also has a fair amount of experience under her belt for someone so young as well. She's even worked with Nickelodeon in bits, like for the Nick News segments. So she has a fair amount of experience both with companies like that and also independently on her own and pursuing her own projects, and also has a lot of really interesting, awesome writing and story ideas, and she can draw and everything like that. So there's a lot of story ideas that she's shared with me that would be really great to incorporate into this as well. And just like Vivian Lyra Blair, she directs herself, she writes, she likes to do little independent short films and draw. So there's a lot of different ideas to bounce off each other, and that also factors into my overall goal with these actors, which is not to just have them do the voices and do acting across all the media, but also to implement their ideas, see what they feel could be added to the stories, and help to shape their characters as we go along. I don't want only my word to be final. I want them to experience the story as we go along. I want them all to grow with the characters, literally both in age and narratively, and help to form and shape the personalities and experiences that they feel they would go on if they were these characters. And that really makes for a very stable studio, company, team, and project environment, and also stability going forward. So I want her to also play a variety of characters, mainly Sutal. So Sutal is one of the lead characters. She comes in later in the book, about after 100 pages, but she becomes a regular after that. She is basically this royal character who's kind of one of the last descendants of the Golden Age, where there's no more really royal, regal characters and families left. So her family is one of the few left, but she's basically the only one left of her family. She starts out in this normal form, and then she starts to get abilities later on, which is explained after. She has a very, very specific, special connection to the land, which is why in the bottom right, you can see that she has a fog control form. So she goes from this innocent, sweet little girl to being very strong and fully connected to nature. She's kind of like Poison Ivy, but infused with magic. And the other character I wanted to play is Ilara. Ilara is a character that comes in later. She has a little twist of her own as well. She is basically the head of the Valley of Spirits, which is a valley connected directly to the Pit of Despair. So it's kind of like split the good, the bad, and herself and the other spirits just keep the balance, keep their land as one of the only light magic, good magic realms, lands, or seasons remaining. Kind of like how in The Mandalorian, underneath Mandalore, there is just a bit of vibrancy and nature remaining. So that is what the Valley of Spirits is in this story. And at the bottom left, the other character is Lucy. So she is the other messenger archivist. Um, Not really time traveler. I don't really want time travel in this because I want this to be like Star Wars, where it is all set in stone and can't be altered. But there are kind of alternate scenarios. So she is like a Dais, but she is a female version basically, and she's more tech focused and she's younger and she's traveled around. She's older than she looks, and she is an archivist and messenger for the overseers as well. So she is not in the first book, but she will be very prominent in the second book, and she'll have a good dynamic between herself and Adias. So here she is, Lucy the archivist. There's a lot of opportunities for new settings and environments, and really focusing on another female lead, which is what I've subtly been going for this, having the young female lead, then having this adult female lead, and having them go together. But there's also a balance between the male leads, kind of same amount of lead characters and supporting characters. And you can see her little information snippet right at the bottom. This is just a little more about Sutel, just the zoomed in image. So she has this gilded royal form, and she can control the fog, and the fog is connected with everything. And it's, of course, a transparent type of element. So it can get into people's minds, it can read their thoughts, it can influence them. So similar to pheromones, but not pheromones, because the effect stops as soon as the fog exits the mind. So again, inspiration from Poison Ivy as well, but in a, I think, more unique and grounded way. This is the next actor, Brody Watts. So he's another close personal friend. So he does a lot of content creation, streaming, has his own popular Discord server. And he can do a lot of different voices, like the low growling, in between, and of course grunts and things like that. So I have several creatures and also kind of warrior and demon-like characters in mind for him as well. And just like with the other actors, we can explore more to see what other characters fit, and also give him and the other actors all their own personal characters if they wish to have that. So first character is Dengal. I first named him the Frog Manager, so that's man-ager. So he's like a frog manager, but that's how people in the universe call him. But his name is Dengal. He's this intergalactic businessman, very much a swindler, kind of like Lando Calrissian in frog form. But he becomes a lead character. He is throughout the entire book. The next are the Tie Cup. So those are how the Tie Cup troll, kind of goblin-like dwarves, protectors of the good side of the forest, look like. Next are these kind of yokai-inspired undead samurai, so pulling from Japanese folklore, but also doing more research on it. They're basically the only ones left in the Japanese realm, and they are the only humanoid, fully humanoid kind of creatures left in the land overall. And they're not good, they're not evil, they're just kind of undead. They're kind of very protective. They are infused with the Emperor's essence, and they are just loyal and focused on protecting him and his lamb. They have no consciousness of or awareness of what's happened. They don't know about the cosmic cataclysm. They don't know about the modern day. All they see is the land as it was before. And next is just like a demon, and Regal Tier and Living Cavern. So the Living Cavern concept isn't here. It's other slides is this serpent that I was mentioning before, the Serpent of Mount Shrock, that is basically fused with the cavern, and he is the personal attaché right hand of the Emperor. Regal Tyr is a hardened Golden Age warrior, basically the only one left, and he is Sutal's father. Um, and then the rest is just like a demon, troll, hunter. This is a character I haven't really expanded on, but it could be one of the Emperor's forms. Um, and so that's just something to explore. I'm thinking this demon character could have been who the serpent was before the essence was transferred. But this is all kind of for solo stories that I want to explore afterwards or in the future books as well. This is Regal Tyr, so you can see how he looks very hardened, regal, royal, armored warrior. He has that bluish, greenish tint just like his daughter. This is the Living Cavern cave serpent. So the Living Cavern cave is the bridge, kind of portal between the Pit of Despair and the Valley of Spirits, and he makes sure that no one gets in easily and no one gets out. And these are the portfolios of all the actors. So Vivian, both Vivians, Christopher, Brimstone, Brody, and Richard. Brody does not have an IMDb yet, so I've attached his LinkedIn here. So the core themes, I will just briefly go through these: redemption and healing, perfection versus nature, cosmic scale, personal struggle, overseers and large entities. So the story briefly introduces overseers, who are not exactly gods, but they're cosmic sentinels and watchers, similar to what Marvel has been doing with their Watcher, but these overseers are kind of interfering with the events, but not changing things. They are working with other beings in the universe and sending them as messengers and kind of like narrators in the story to watch over the galaxy, report back to them, and things like that. So they're kind of a mix of the Watchers from Marvel and also the Prophets in Halo. So they're not gods, Watchers that are adds a far more grander taste to a very grounded story, teases the galaxy spanning adventure to come in the second book. Wounded, torn, and scattered cosmos, emergence of godlike overseers creates a vast scale and wonder, and presents the opportunity to incorporate religion and faith into the next stories, which I've already touched on in the book with the discussion of hell on earth and whether a world plundered in darkness is better or worse than living in hell itself. The central struggle, back to redemption and healing, is the painstaking cycle of creation and repair, mending a fractured cosmos, redemption for the universe, for Dyra, and other characters. They redeem themselves in both bodies. So her redeeming herself in both bodies, that will make sense later on. I don't want to cover any big plot twists or anything in this presentation. I want that to come as a surprise. I think what I've done in the story is again intentionally very basic and simplistic, but also unique in the things that happen. So perfection versus nature, a fundamental philosophical conflict, is introduced through Timon's perspective. He argues that a perfect life and ultimate knowledge were never needed. One should follow life and nature's paths. It's contrasted with the villain, whose name is Braincry, her destructive pursuit of making every detail perfect because she had her life and love taken, so she didn't want to let others have their lives, love, and also happiness. Melancholic yet hopeful, philosophical, character-driven narrative, immersive world building, which is the focus of this in general. And adjusting and adding to the dialogue will come with the script. I am putting together a little sample script to try to do that, but it would require a team of writers as well, just to bounce ideas off each other and make sure everyone has the amount of dialogue that they need. antagonistic force, the journey as a cycle. So all of these are the core aspects of the story. So kind of having these godlike entities who are setting up the next story. You have these characters who are like messengers and narrators for them, which I'll get onto a bit later. You have the nature versus technology aspect, which I have always loved. I have recently started to get more into Warhammer, and Warhammer is, of course, focused on technology versus organisms, but I've always loved that aspect in general, and I'm incorporating that now, even before I got into that universe. And the religious aspects, which I'm not intending to push um, in a realistic, literal sense, more so just the mystical faith and personal growth and discovery aspects, but done in unique ways. The Going back to melancholic yet hopeful, the initial tone is heavy with sorrow and nostalgia for a lost golden age and ordinary things. So that's also why I call it the golden age, because a lot of people call what they grew up on as kids as the golden age, so whether it's the 80s, the 90s, or in my case, the 2000s were the golden age for me. However, this is balanced by a strong sense of hope and determination to fix what has been broken. Um, and a message I try to convey in the story is that you don't need to try to fix what has been broken. You don't need to keep living in the past. You need to add on to it. You need to allow it to evolve. Otherwise, it destroys you internally. The dialogue, particularly from Timon, relating to this elevates the story beyond a simple fantasy tale by musing on the meaning of life, the nature of perfection, and the path to true wisdom. Going back to perfection versus nature, fundamental philosophical conflict is introduced through Timon's perspective. And that's really it for this slide. I've just briefly gone over all the core aspects. A lot of these themes are not unlike what we've heard a billion times, but again, the world building and just the focus on making this kind of like dreamlike is what will propel this forward and make it super unique. So the main inspirations, which I briefly touched on earlier, Harry Potter, whimsical, magical, vibrant young protagonist set in our world, but more fantastical. The Owl House, which I only started watching recently. I have had a lot of similar ideas to that show for years. I've been developing this since 2018 and going back and forth between making it a game first or show. Now I'm set on a show. And I recently watched The Owl House, and it has not influenced my story drastically. I've just been more inspired in the sense that I want to make it more focused on young characters, and it helped me to craft some of my dialogue to be more natural, like what kids would say, but also changing it a bit to be more fantastical so it's not exactly like what kids in our world would say. So, young female protagonist, entirely fantastical world, one primary adult support lead, small male creature with human personality. So, the difference between Harry Potter and the Owl House and my stuff is that you're not starting from a kid entering this magical world from a modern day Earth. We are starting in the fantasy world. These kids and teens have their abilities and powers. There's already monsters, creatures, magic all around. So it's not going through a door or a portal or being brought by someone into this world or school. It's all just starting directly in these worlds. The next inspiration is Stranger Things. It is a show I've watched since it came out, but I've never been the biggest fan of it. But I've been rewatching it recently for inspiration and research. So it follows young leads, adult protectors, conjoined and separate plot lines between characters. Takes place in our world, and they all come together to find and also fight and unearth dark force residing underground, which drastically changes the tone from something modern and in our world to more fantastical with sci-fi and literally Dungeons and Dragons elements. I love the aesthetic of the show. I love the horror. I love the focus on young characters, and combining that with an actual fantasy world is exactly what I'm going for. You have the unearthed, hellish place, in my case, what I call the pit of despair, which is like hell in my universe, and combining that all with a fantasy environment, like an Owl House, and things like Gravity Falls. Which next, Gravity Falls, young male and female protagonists, mysteries, natural, whimsical, family friendly, with dark undertones, not grim dark, not focused solely on dark fantasy in a mature adult way, but with dark undertones. The Witcher, magic, sorcerers, mutants, and monsters. Regal, royal, old time period, so blending the medieval kind of dark age of magic, witches, and wizards with our kind of modern world. Of course, the games and the books take place on Earth as well, but they are not set in the future, so I'm blending all these timelines like that as well. Zelda, somewhat stylized, large but not too massive world, so that applies both to the animated series and the game aspect. And Zelda has always been the pinnacle of blending a fantasy, rural, grounded place with technology, especially Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Link wakes up in the future, everything's changed, and now there's all this crazy technology, which there always was in the previous games, but now it's kind of pushed more. So I'm doing a similar thing to that, but I'm not going crazy on the technology, at least not yet. Star Trek, sci-fi on a grounded level, or science fantasy, which is what Star Wars is, but again, not going for that war waging aspect because there is no war going on. The cosmic cataclysm just wiped out a lot of the DNA of the galaxy. It didn't kill a lot of populations, it just changed the literal DNA. It made everything mutated, and it changed how time works and basically blended all these eras together. Warhammer 40K, Dark Future, again, not grimdark. Emperor controls, influences the world. That is in my story as well. Grounded fantasy and sci-fi mix, and intelligent monsters and creatures. So I know a lot of stories have had emperors in them, but I feel what I've done is something pretty unique. It is kind of blending, again, technology versus nature, but also creatures versus humanity. A lot of humans have turned into creatures. A lot of creatures have turned into kind of larger versions of creatures, but also some have become humanoids. So there's a lot of unique exploration in this, and all of these have always been my main inspirations alongside We Can Be Heroes. Um, and I feel that I've blended all of them together pretty well so we can reach a larger audience and also have a ton of variety in this and also going forward. So the current material that exists is the art compendium. So it is an art book that I made with the creatures, most of the environments, and lore. Some of the lore has changed a bit in the first novel that I just released, which is called Vanishing Earth. But most of it still stays the same, and the goal is to look at both the novel and the art book and see what works best, what can be combined again. And the sequel book I'm being written, the title is subject to change, New Earth, Book 2, Shattered Time. So I was going back and forth between having it just be called The Seasons of Fantasy, but it's just a franchise name, Season of Fantasy. Then New Earth is this current trilogy of books I'm making. It might go beyond a trilogy. It probably will, and I might keep the New Earth title or not. New Earth just obviously refers to New Earth, the Earth, but a newer, though old version of itself. So I've put a lot of thought into this, and I feel even just the art book and the novel have enough material to combine and contrast for the initial season. And like I mentioned, I'm putting together a little sample script with more dialogue and some changes, so a lot to pull from. So the cosmic cataclysm and bang. So this is explained in the story in detail. I won't go over it, but basically there was exploration happening in space, and then this cosmic bang cataclysm happened. It was triggered by the overseers because they reset the universe every so few thousand years or millions of years. Haven't worked out that specific detail. I was going to expand on that in the second book, but it's definitely within the thousands of years range. So the cosmic cataclysm happened in our time, 2024, 2025. And these are just concepts that I made, kind of showing how it's heaven and earth mixing together, and then you get what is the main new earth land, which is like hell on earth. So I'm really just trying to blend everything. Like, if we had heaven and earth crash and collide and combine with each other, we would have hell on earth, which is what earth was at the very beginning, right? With the lava and everything. So I'm kind of going back to that, but in a more magical, whimsical way, of course, as well. And I've added a wolf there as well, because it just shows how animals also are starting to get new abilities and powers, and they can just travel and survive these types of cataclysms, but it also just looked cool, so I added that as well. So here is the world. This is a very, very basic map. I've made highly detailed maps that I will show, I think, in the next slide or a bit later in this presentation. But this is the overall layout of the map. So the second layout on the right is, of course, more so focused towards the game aspects. But it's also still an accurate layout of how I see the map. So you have the Vanishing Forest, where everything starts. You have Laudor Village, which is where Dyra, Timon, Zeke, who is also the magistrate, and others reside from. Stork Brinko is a rivalry hunters village, basically by these occupying alien type of species who wiped out um, most of the original villagers, who are called Tortai. I will get to these character designs a bit later in this presentation. But basically, I added that to further orchestrate and add on to the war versus peace and also technology versus nature aspect, because Laodor people, or call them the Liao or Dor, anything that's more convenient. They are very, very peace loving. They are very, very focused on nature and blending the magic between the cosmos and life and nature itself. While Stark Brinko are pillagers, hunters, they're destructive, they steal whatever they want, and they don't really harness magic. They just focus on brute force. But when they do use magic, it is from potions that they mix and brew from whatever they stole or pillaged from other village. Valley of the Vanished is where basically the last record of normal civilization was in the world. So Valley of the Vanished is kind of a blend of ancient Japan and other rural types of ancient places in our world and history. And like I said, it's the last record in the universe of where there were people, they were writing stories as the cataclysm happened, they were trying to escape, but it was so instant that not all of them were able to escape. Some of them died from mutations, but most of them became these kind of undead ghouls, and I expand on that in the novel, of course, and also the art book. And I just felt it was interesting to have one realm where it was very connected to our world and our history, um, and was kind of like the last record, last scene, uh, taste and hint of civilization and humanity, because that really is the last realm where there are humanoids. There are other areas, of course, where there are humanoids, but that's the last one where they're like not fully mutated people, they're more so undead. And then you have Mount Shrock, which I briefly covered before, which is kind of a mix of my own creation and Mordor. And then all of the other areas. So you'd have on the right kind of a Russia Old England blend. In this, Old England and Russia fuse together, and it creates kind of this gothic steampunk type of aesthetic and area. So that's there on the right. And the portal, which looks like water underneath Mount Shrock, is basically like a shield, and it is specifically created to lead into the pit of despair, which is hell. So it's kind of like a cover up for hell, which is still fairly a myth in this time period and universe, but it exists. And even though people know about Mount Shrock, they don't really know about the hell that resides underneath. They assume the emperor is dead, and he is, but not entirely. So there's kind of a whole underground world, which was inspired by Stranger Things, and also um, I think it was Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild, where you have that underground world for you to explore. So a lot has gone into making the world, even though it is very, very basic. And I feel going through the simplistic, straightforward, basic route is the best format, because you have all of these worlds fused together. And that's the whole point of the cosmic cataclysm or cosmic bang. And it just creates these close quarters encounters, and you're constantly finding these weird creatures and enemies and things like that. And then on the right, like I mentioned, you have the basic layout. You have the vanishing forest, water hole area of conflict, which is kind of like the single water hole, even though there's ocean behind them. There's like this water hole with water that's kind of healthier and tastes better. So there's like a conflict between the Laudor and the Storkbrinko and any other creatures that come into contact with it. And that's basically it for the map. I expand on it more as we go on. So here's the map, like I said, more detailed. So you have the kind of close quarters fused elements. You have Mount Shrock at the bottom right, along with some ancient castle ruins. You have the snowy areas. So a mix of weather, a mix of different styles and day-night cycles. You have the Leodor village at the top left, with kind of like the crops and harvesting, and then you have the Storkbrinko village kind of across from it. But keep in mind, this is like a standard fantasy map. This isn't representative of how close everything is together. These are just kind of sections of them. I might make more map concepts like this. And then you have, again, more ruins. So there are castle ruins as well. And everything from our world, everything from every time period has kind of been brought to the future and blended and fused. So it's very grim, but it's not grim dark. This is Liaodor village and the sacred fish statue. So Liaodor, just like the name implies, just life, and like I mentioned, the species and people there are natives to the land, and they just focus on life, and they're one of the most vibrant areas in the land. Um, and the fish is just representative of their ways. They love creatures, love animals, love life. They harvest crops. They make and find their own food. And they kind of pray to this fish because it represents one of the remaining normal, natural looking beings. This is just a statue of a fish, or it could be a fish that was sized up and just hardened, like metallic. So there's a lot to explore here, and a lot of interesting interactions in the characters, and again, anime influence. The sky will be kind of shattered, but maybe sometimes it doesn't have to be. This is the barren peaks. This is similar to Zeta Halo and Halo Infinite, where it's just these barren peaks and mountains and just a valley with nothingness. And this is where those odd characters like the Godman, Secluded Prospector can come in. The Sunken Valley is connected to the Valley of Spirits. And a lot of the spirits there are actually spirits and kind of human forms of the people who died or vanished once this valley kind of overflowed and sunk. The water levels have drained over time, but people were caught in the effects when the whole cosmic cataclysm basically made the oceans into these giant tsunamis and things like that. The Vanishing Forest, this is one of the very few light areas of the Vanishing Forest, is kind of the entrance, but also could be an exit. There's brief light, and it looks beautiful when you enter it, but then there are different types of creatures that interfere and try to capture the explorers. And these are more images of the Vanishing Forest. The wizard type of character is not really a specific character. It could be later on, but this is just to show the contrast between the sometimes vibrant and light forest at the beginning. And then as you traverse deeper into it, because it spreads all across the land, it becomes darker and scarier. Storm Guardian of the Old England Realm. So this is a guardian that briefly appears in the story when the characters are in the Old England realm. So there are these kind of world guardians all around, and they're based on the elements of their realms. This is a guy that's just basically made of a storm. There's not really a lot of lore behind it. It's just the storm was given life, and everything came alive after the cataclysm and became very sentient. So this is one of those protectors, guardians, similar to the Bendu in Star Wars Rebels. Kind of in between, doesn't really pick a side, just doesn't want anyone disturbing the peace, especially of the land. And these are some images of a prototype, kind of concept prototype of how I want the world to look. It can be less purple. Keep in mind, this is for the game world, but I'll also be repurposing this to make 3D animated shorts as a proof of concept, and I will be recording some lines with two of the actors, Vivian Watson and Brody Watts, just to have them both do all of the female and male voices before everyone else would come on if they would be interested. And this is just showing a very, very small portion of the land. So there's Liaodor, there's the mountain in the distance, and I have the rest of the screenshots, which shows like the beginning of Mount Shrock and things like that, on the ArtStation link that I've linked above. And this just to show how I want the world to look. There's a bit of a kind of chromatic aberration effect to kind of make everything look more bold and vibrant, and also blending realism and stylized effects, and also just showing how shattered the world has become. So there's a lot of stylistic exploration and potential for this. My goal for the animated series is either to have it be 2D or 3D. it doesn't really matter to me. Whatever the studio is capable of and comfortable with is how the style will go. And then going back to the golden age of man. So golden age of man didn't just end with the cataclysm. There was an entire war going on. So you have these kind of alien enemy ships. I haven't exactly sorted out the details for this yet. I was going to expand on it again in the second book. But these aren't really alien ships, they're alien looking ships, so they're kind of the result of humanity tinkering with, you could say AI, but it's not really AI. It's not a Terminator situation. It's more so tinkering with the unholy, with crimes against nature, fusing technology and organisms, and then having that turn on you, and then you have a war. So that's also why I consider this a civil war, because these are man made monstrosities and technologies. And this was the final war before the cataclysm wiped everything out and changed everything. So I tried to be very unique with the vehicles and the story going on here. I have more concepts in the work for this, and all of that will be included with the second art book as well. But this is really where I feel I illustrated best kind of the technology versus nature and organisms aspect again. And there's a little snippet in the bottom right, which you can read with the presentation directly in hand. But basically, the golden age of man was when all nations and armies banded together to conquer the first instance of mythical land, which eventually became Mount Shruk and New Earth. There were reports of ungodly monsters terrorizing that area and somehow causing earthquakes, eruptions, and disturbances worldwide. And this is why they started to create these technology and biological mixes. Hundreds of years after the conquest, many of the brave soldiers would find themselves reanimated in their spiritual forms and forced to either willingly join the serpent Shrok's army or be cast down to the mines. In reality, they had no real choice, as those who chose to serve, like in their previous life, were immediately transformed into soldiers of hell and lost their individuality and things like that, blending heaven and earth. So the only change that's happened there is hundreds of years. It's thousands of years. So a lot of these soldiers, a lot of these people have been reanimated as these ghouls and demons, and they are unwillingly serving um, the serpent called Shruk, which I've kind of changed a little bit in the story as well. There is a serpent, but it's not exactly the mountain itself. It's kind of a blend and kind of contributing to the evil and sickness being spread by the lava and the emperor's presence. So that's the golden age of man with very, very little changes. So this is Brain Cry. This is the only concept I have of her at the moment. But I will have more for the second book. And this is also Timon in one of his very early on looks. But this is kind of closer to how I want him to look at the end of the story. He's kind of more regal. He's mature. He's grown up a little more. And he spent a lot more time with Brain Cry. He's not a villain. He doesn't become a villain, but they just spend more time together. It'll make sense in the context of the story. So Brain Cry is this kind of Dr. Octopus type of inspired character. She's lost her face. She's completely mechanical. She has wires. And her name is exactly what she can do. She can just use her brain. She doesn't have to move any of her physical arms, but there's barely anything left. So she's also kind of like Saw Gerrera, where she's lost her physical and emotional humanity over time. And basically, she is the core of the nature versus technology battle in this story and universe, at least for the first two books and seasons. And she basically tries to make everything in her technological image and Like I mentioned before, she lost everything, so she tries to make everything perfect for herself. So she tries to eliminate all death, disease by making everything technological. So another one of those um, honorable ideas and motivations, but awful methods and executions. So this is tying into that. So there's a dimension mech protector. This ties into the overseers and also to brain cry because she starts controlling everything. So as I written here, there was an explorer, a Zytruvian explorer who I've made a concept for as well. This species with blue or purple skin. 46,000 years before the events of this, went exploring, accidentally stumbled upon the overseers. They would not let him leave, so they kind of put him into this robot and made him this mech protector of the galaxy. And then later on, which I'm going to expand on in the second book, Braincry takes control of him and then basically triggers like a little civil war, not a huge waging war, but like a battle between Braincry, her own minions and forces, and the Overseers. And then that's also where the lead characters come in from this first novel. So that's how I'm handling the kind of galaxy spanning story aspect. And it's going to be still very grounded, kind of smaller in scale. No multiverse stuff, at least not in as an intense way as Marvel and DC do. And here are additional characters and artwork. So this is the female and male Tortai. They are a very, very simple native people to the land. Like I mentioned, these stork-like creatures, the Stork Brinko territory creatures, basically wiped out a lot of them and took their land. And they are basically one of the most ancient, in tune characters and creatures with the land. They heal and they perform basically nature-based magic, and they can mentor people and characters like that. So they're like the tie cups, but much older and much wiser in a sense. Vixer, the dancing whale, is just an example of one of the many fun random characters. So Vixer was a dancer, cosmic cataclysm, became a dancing whale, has kind of like this bioluminescent magic. And just like in the Star Wars cantina, she's not really privy to everything going on. She knows what happens, of course, but she doesn't pay attention to the outside world. She dances, she entertains, that's her purpose. At the top right is a character, kind of traveler called the Gobman. He's kind of a sad, lonely character, kind of like Gollum. Not evil, just very, very timid, and explores around. I want to make a separate book and graphic novel, even just exploring all the random characters, just like I did with the art book. So that's what these characters will mainly be for. Otherwise, they just get cameos and stuff and mentions in the main novels. And the bottom right is the messenger spy. So he is a spy, and he's just a messenger. He kind of is like a bounty hunter. Right now, he is reporting to Braincry, and he can teleport and things like that. So just very simple type of character. This is the Zytruvian and his species. This is not the specific one who gets entrapped and fused with this mechanical crab. It could be, but this is just how his species looks. And next to him is a thoraxoid space ant. So this space ant was part of the pre-cataclysm golden age world. I briefly mentioned the species at the beginning of the book, but I will expand on them highly in the second book. The robot Cursed to Heal. This is a robot that'll be in the second book as well. So you can see I'm setting up a lot of these sci-fi characters now. This is a robot who kind of has an organic brain. So again, cataclysm affected everyone and everything. He's kind of one of Braincry's timid informants as well, but involuntary because she kind of keeps him alive even though he doesn't want to be. So these are screenshots from an animation cycle I made of him where he's cursed to heal forever. So he walks, he stutters, he loses bolts, and then they come back to him. And basically, when he's about to find peace and die, he just gets repaired, and that's his loop, his cycle. So there's the messenger spy. The crow boys are these really creepy puppet looking characters who just cause mischief. They're like pranksters in the universe, nothing really to them, just random characters. The Venus is a man-eating Venus flytrap who kind of fuses with her victims and prey. Took some inspiration from a Demogorgon from Stranger Things. This is just basically the queen version. I haven't decided if there are many of these, but there's one, and she's briefly in the book, in the first book. She's exactly what she looks like. She's a man-eating plant. She's connected to the vanishing forest. She's very protective of her area, and she kind of controls the cull trees. So that's expanded on a bit later. And these are the storks. So you can see I tried to make them kind of look alien-like. Um, I haven't decided if they're actually mutated creatures. I want to make them very ambiguous. I want them to be kind of like Yoda's species in Star Wars, where you don't know what they are, you don't know what they came from. They look like intergalactic beings, but they also look like they could have been mutated locals or natives. And they are very aggressive. They don't speak. They basically communicate with like their tentacles and when they kind of infuse themselves, um, similar to the enemies in the Golden Age War. So they could be descendants of those or kind of like human forms of those. And I've taken some inspiration from Covenant lore in Halo as well. This is another just standard side character, just showing off characters that could be voiced internally. Herb the Unneighborly Zombie, just a guy who was depressed and angry at everyone in the world before the cataclysm, and now he's basically like suffering for it, and he just doesn't want to be with or look at anyone. He's like a secluded guy. Fixer the Dancing Whale, just like I mentioned before and went over her history. And these are just more of the very mutated side characters. Shapeshifter Dragon Frog or a Drogtum, Shapeshifter Troll, Mr. Fly, and Cuddly Crab. So these are all basically 1 to 2 people kind of per body who were doing circus acts or who were doing whatever career they were in, and they got fused with whatever animals were close to them. So I'm exploring the body horror in this, but not actually showing it, just kind of the aftermath, because it's a very interesting psychological thing when kids and teens see, or anyone really sees body horror happening, it can be disturbing, right? But aftermath, it just becomes kind of like a funny, weird, fun, even kind of cuddly character, even though they are these grotesque monsters. So that factors into the psychological aspect that I like to explore. And these are some of the characters I mentioned before as well. So Sewer Clown, known as Jester Velma Shar, um, again mixed. So this character has a face on its back and then a face on the front. The Godman, who I explained before, and the secluded prospector is similar to Herb, the unneighborly zombie. He's very secluded. He doesn't like anyone. He kind of ignores everything and he's kind of disoriented with everything. And that's basically it. These characters definitely fit better into animated form than focusing on them in the main novels. And getting to the end of this presentation, what's the end goal for this? So adapt each novel into an audiobook upon release, which I'm about to do with the first one, mainly with just myself, Vivian Wasson, and Brody Watts. We'll have to discuss that more, but that is the goal. adapt each novel into a season or create a season instead of a novel, but I want it to kind of be like a Harry Potter, Game of Thrones kind of situation where I still get to create novels, and eventually adapt the show into a game with DLC or few games. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I initially wanted this to be a game, but I don't want to rush the product. I want it to be my basically magnum opus of a video game, and then have the second book spin off be like DLC or its own thing. And I want to see if the games would fully adapt the animated show and the novels scene by scene, or if they would be their own stories within the universe. So I'm aiming to do kind of both, but we'll have to see at the end. Continue to expand on the characters with spin-offs, merchandising that benefits the lore and brings in a new audience. So like things like figures, of course, where there's lore on the back, art books and things like that, shirts, the usual stuff. And I've designed the creatures and characters to be vibrant and fun for those reasons as well. And also board games, cosplaying, etc. I think this universe would be really great as a board game as well. As a team, studio, and company, be a driving force for representing young and other new talent of all ages as new characters are introduced. So do this as a team with whoever I work with on this, and also my company, Grimberg Games Inc. And just always be partners and give people opportunities to submit auditions. Have the actors grow with their characters and voice and portray them in all media games, audiobooks, and live action if that would ever happen. If an actor is unavailable, have a stand-in. So that can either be from the actors I get now or from other ones. What's next? So I'm writing book 2 called Shattered Time, but the name of it might change. I'm creating the second art book, which will have a lot of the art that I haven't finished yet or that I have shown here that will be mixed with that. Create 3D animated shorts and proof of concepts in Unreal, and also adapting book 1 into an audiobook and for the next books as well. And that is the last slide. So I hope this presentation really captured what I am trying to go for here. I will have the book linked in this presentation as I do at the beginning. I'll have the file directly available instead of just having to go through Amazon for it. And I hope this looks very promising and can entice a lot of different audiences and age demographics. And that's all I have to show for now. So thank you very much for sitting through this, for listening. I know it was fairly lengthy, but this is the first presentation. This is how I have to present the universe and IP in detail, so it's understandable what it is. And I look forward to continuing to develop this and develop this with whomever is watching this and maybe interested to work in it with me for this foreseeable future. So thank you again and have a fantastic day.